Hello everyone, welcome to some more TSL9 casts. We are doing the grand finals this time, Maru versus Serral, best of 7, with Serral starting up 1-0 thanks to his upper bracket advantage. In the top left of Moondance we have Maru, and in the bottom right we have Serral. Some of you might be looking at this and hearing this and thinking this sounds awfully familiar. Yeah, I did cast the finals if you guys were watching live, or whatever rebroadcast, whatever. Cast with Steadfast. Had a very fun time, but of course, gotta do the YouTube things. But also wanted to take the opportunity to kind of do a little bit of, a little bit of analysis, some more of like hindsight commentating as well. So I might do a little more pausing than you would expect in a straight up cast, but hopefully still also just the enjoyable being able to listen to it as we go along for the ride. So, to set the stage, we do have Maru coming in from the lower brackets, a place that didn't really expect to be, at least as soon as he was. Went through the entire thing, starting back in the online week. Number 1, I think, is when he got knocked down. And then made it all the way here, but Serral had a flawless run, never lost a series, and thus is rewarded with a 1-map advantage. Classic. Very classic double elimination, I guess, or... not even classic's not the right word, but other games will use the, actually I forget what the word is, but you know, they'll play like one best of 3 and then another best of 3, a bracket reset. StarCraft does not do that. It's, as far as I know, has never really done that. I just don't think many of us enjoy it. And then there's even some contention on whether or not we should be giving the upper bracket player any additional victory. I am very behind the idea of not giving them a win if it is a 3-day tournament where the lower bracket player has to play a lot more and a lot longer, but this was not really that tournament. TSL9 had, yes, a 3-day weekend style offline tournament, but only after playing 2 weeks of online. So on the finals day, Maru did have to play 2 other best of 7s, or 1 other best of 7 actually. He played even less than Serral. Oh, they both play the same amount, I guess I should say. So this actually, I don't know, I just didn't think it was that big of a deal, really. So, I am on board that scenario, having a 1-map advantage. If it's literally like an MLG from 2012, where the lower bracket player has had to play twice as long and twice as many games, or whatever super terrible time they've had, then I think... just completely resetting it to 0-0 can make sense. This is kind of the middle ground that has been decided. So a lot of talk about other things aside from the game, but we do have the 1-1-1 opener from Maru that does not lead into Hellions. Now, Serral scouted this with a Ling, and from this, I really think that this already signals to Serral what type of opener it is. So he sees that it is not going to be a Hellion-based opener. That was even further confirmed with only a single Hellion popping out right in case that Ling got in there maybe too soon. Now the point is this was not ambiguous. This was not going to transfer over, at least not until after a few more rounds of Marines. Now what is that? Why is that important, right? Well, one of the reasons it's important is that a lot of the times when you do open up like this, the way that Maru is doing, you're not going to get a Banshee. You're going to get a Medevac. And a Medevac does not help you against maybe like a Roach Rush, which is exactly what Serral's doing. So the timing of that scout was really important. It was probably one of the earliest scouts you can really get. And I think in this meta, I think is also, like I said, kind of obvious to Serral. Maybe there is some ambiguity, but I still think that Serral is choosing this off of information, not just because this is Moondance. It does absolutely seem like a reaction, the way that he timed everything out after seeing what he saw. So if you don't have a Banshee on the way, then it's very unlikely you're going to be able to defend a Roach Rush. And in this case, Maru is not playing really safe at all. He's also not going to swap off to a factory with a tech lab to get a tank either, which would be something you could do if you were afraid of them going into Roaches. So in this case, he doesn't actually see the Roach Warren, but he does see the Roaches pop out, and of course saw the second gas as well. So that information is actually pretty critical. Yet he refuses to go into a tech lab factory, which is actually, this basically means, I think this is what we said on the broadcast, this basically means that he didn't actually see this happen, which is a bit weird, honestly, because we couldn't really check at the time. We actually didn't really have ourselves inside the game. at least not very conveniently. So usually we'll do that, but if we're just using the observer feed, then it can be a little weird to just constantly ask, you know, like, okay, observer, check this, check that, check this. But just to really look at this moment by moment. Again, Maru is continuing along with his build. Serral is planning for a Roach Ling attack. This drop goes into the main. Sees a second gas. I mean, that's not so suspicious right now. I mean, that's not so bad. Wouldamine actually gets a pop off, but he actually sees the roaches. So what we should check then next is where he was looking when that happened, right? So this is Maru's point of view. We don't get to see his clicks or anything like that, but we do get to see that he is paying attention. Oh, and then he jarred. Oh, okay, there you go. There you go. Oh, he's so fast. Jesus. Oh, my God. Maybe even too fast. So he actually looks away when he can see the roaches, and by the time he looks back, honestly, that was too fast for even me to see. But apparently he did not see it. So end of the day, didn't see the roach warren, didn't see the roaches actually pop, maybe thought that he had more time, or that this was just going to be, you know, a eventual macro build there from Serral. He sees the roaches with the Hellions. This is the first time that he actually gets to really react, and that is already very late. So he does react as well as one could in his situation, pulling the SCVs. Hellions race back home, but it is a very unfortunate scenario. If he had seen the roaches pop, or gone with a, okay, what if I'm being pushed here, just kind of that scared moment, and started up a Banshee, then he'd probably be okay. But he would have wanted to have the Raven, so just going off of a feeling would have been bad for him. If he had seen the Roach Warren, I 100% believe he would have canceled the Raven in exchange for a faster Banshee. I think that would have been way too greedy not to. He also would have gotten a bunker, and maybe with some Maru magic would have held otherwise, even without a Banshee, but we can see the game's pretty much already over. Maru not getting that scout is really just unfortunate, because he had the possibility of actually scouting this, and we just looked away at the wrong moment. And with Lings also included, this really does usually end the game. If it's just a Roach Ravager push, sometimes you can, well, you can say you survived, even if you're not really surviving. That's absolutely can still do game-ending damage, but the Lings usually really solidify it. Banshee can clear up 7 roaches eventually with the help of an SCV pull even. You know, it's not bad. Well, it's not great, but it's something. But against Lings as well, spilling forth, reinforcing as immediately as they can. That really does put the nail in the coffin, and that's exactly what's happening here. Maru doesn't have 3 CC. Even if he did, coming back from a position where he's down to 7 SCVs, pretty damn impossible. Serral choosing to do something very strategically good and getting rewarded for it. This all could have gone awry if Maru had seen that Roach Warren or had seen the roaches pop out. That's extra, I don't know, what, 20 seconds of seeing them back when they're being created versus when they're over on this side of the map. Actually, I believe Moondance's rush distance is, I want to say 31 seconds. So the additional 31 seconds, let's go with that, is huge. Would have been big. He might have even been able to still get the Raven, but then gotten bunkers to hold, so his tank could have popped out and then had a Banshee afterwards and made, again, like a Miracle Maru hold. Or he could have just gone right into a Banshee as well as attack tank and bunkers, of course. But it all came down to not being able to actually scout that it was going to be an attack, and Maru is 100% dead. Don't need to have watched this one to know that he is 100% dead. 12 workers to 47. Serral's going to go for the jugular, building a lot more roaches, and Maru is going to try and play this game out despite being a really terrible start to a best of 7. Good luck to him, right? But Serral has got no reason to lose this game. Double Banshee is going to come in here. Doesn't have Cloak, so it's really limited in the potential. Does actually grab 7 drones, which would be pretty good if this was a very, very different game. And then a Banshee dying for that might have been okay. But all the Banshees on their side of the map was also a good sign for Serral to just send his units across. Again, with Lings as well. Not that 2 Banshees would have stopped this. They might have gotten a little bit more of an alert. And there you have it, GG. Serral wins really off of strategy. A little bit of luck as well. You gotta admit that. A little bit of a luck move. Because I think Maru with this opener, does anticipate being able to scout most things, really pick up on all those subtle signs, the amount of drones, the amount of gas, what pops out of the larva. Obviously, seeing the main base, a lot of times the technology will be there. Even like what reacts to the drop, I think, can be sometimes a tell, right? But in that case, it was just perfectly timed that he wasn't paying attention when the one biggest reveal was actually shown to him. And good on Serral to go for the Roachborn in this location as well. It got a little close to being scouted, sure, but I think it's, it's obviously less likely to be scouted against the medevac drop that is almost always going to go into the main. And it's even kind of less likely to be scouted against maybe Hellions that would enter into the natural, because Queens would usually be there to kind of at least shoo them away or kill them. They'd only get locked in the drone line, and they still wouldn't see the Roachborn tucked into the corner as it is. So that was a really clever space for Serral to do that, but also just a really good maneuver. Really, I think a lot based off that Ling Scout getting such a good scout. And then it was about making sure that Maru couldn't have any last-second miracle holds, which he could not. So that is game 1 done and dusted. Moving on to game 2. Game number 2. Bottom right of Cosmic Sapphire, we have Maru. In the top left, it is Serral. So game number 2, but Serral's already up 2-0 because of the benefit of coming from the winner's bracket. Maru was going to do a medevac opener, and did do it, but was up against someone who was rushing roaches and didn't have a good time. Did not scout it, didn't have a good time defending against it. So what does Maru do? Send out a couple of SCVs. Gonna proxy T-Rex. Kind of a safe blanket for Maru to go with. And because it does give you control over the game. I mean, it can fail. It can fail rather bad, technically, if it's scouted and the drones are pulled into it when the barracks are like halfway done. That is probably the worst scenario. You have the scenario where they're scouted immediately and they just cancel one of the barracks, maybe still get one up and running. Well, really, if they're scouted like immediately and the drones are pulled, more likely the Terran cancels both barracks, puts one back at home. You do have a delay. It is a little bit awkward, but probably not going to kill you. If you're scouted, like I said, maybe a little bit later, you can cancel one barracks, but then really try hard to micro at least one barracks to get up and running. Go for kind of a proxy Reaper at that point. And then those are kind of the options before both barracks are done. The other worst case scenario would be if both barracks finish and you're like, yeah, let's go, and then it was actually a 16 pool. Also can be kind of weird. Not necessarily devastating depending on how the Zerg reacts still. But as you can see here, Maru went for the tucked-in corner on Cosmic Sapphire. So very unlikely that it was going to be drone pulled. So technically it still could have been scouted. The Overlord doesn't even get that far, because it's still unlikely this far it's going to be scouted. But even if it was, I do not think Zerg players would pull drones against this. This is so far away. Not unless, again, it was like immediate scout, which would be impossible. Drones are pulled into the bunker, however. This is the start of the defense. Some good micro being shown by Maru so far. And Maru is forced to, micro shown by Serral so far. Yeah, I said that right. And Maru forced to cancel the bunker. But being able to plant one down before that creep actually stops it from happening. Still going to be in range of the hatchery when the Marines are in the bunker. This could still be a problem. Serral wants to nip this in the bud, pulls the drones with the Lings onto the Marines, tries to get that surround, which is somewhat effective, but maybe not effective enough. Maru pretty damn good at this micro thing, man. 5 SCVs, or 5 drones have gone down. 6, actually. And 6 is still pretty good. 6 is still pretty good. The SCV helped to body block a little bit there. We can go back and see maybe how Serral could have microed that better, because that's really what it comes down to when you're pulling the drones like this. So, again, the bunker finishing would be a really big problem. Serral clearly wants to stop that from happening. So feeling that that rush, that need for speed, that need to go ahead and get this done with. You can see him pulling the drones, trying to get this around. Effectively gets this around on one Marine. Even then, kind of was able to wiggle out, but then is unable to get a full surround on the rest of them. Then a couple more reinforcing Marines come forward, and the drones still choose to go after it, which is quite unfortunate, actually, because I think if they had pulled back prior to the reinforcements pulling the drones away, I think that Serral could have actually saved 3 drones. Let's see that again. Maybe speed up until they actually get pulled. There we go. So, yep, trying to go for the surround. Pretty good move. see Maru being the focus fire. So 3 drones go down. If the drones had gone back at this point, what would have happened? Yeah, actually, no. The SCV is still not being bothered. Those Lings only just popped out. So, actually, no. That's still a bit sketch to pull them back. So that's why Serral didn't do it. But it sucks because I think, actually, it's possible if everything got pulled back with the... Well, these 2 Lings might have died to the Marines as they're being pulled back. These 2 apparently get the SCV, but you can see how this would have been really close. And so Serral was thinking probably in the heat of the moment as well, like, oh man, I'm not going to actually be able to stop this bunker, so I have to try and kill the Marines. But actually, the bunker is stopped. It is just so damn close. And it would have been... It, I guess, could have theoretically been a super perfect hold on the Zerg side, but you could see how that was hard to do. And it would have come down to those Lings barely being able to kill the SCV in time. So yeah, 6 drones is a bummer. That does put Serral off on the wrong foot. Seriously, 3 more drones not dying would be a big difference. And Maru can be happy with this, as he generally does get to be pretty happy with his 2 racks openers since he's so adept at making sure that they do enough. Oh, even got the Overlord. I think we missed that on live cast. Okay. And Serral tried really hard to actually stop it, pulling the Queens forward. It's going to be a little late to the injects, or even creep tumors coming down as well. Even got supply blocked. Okay. So was hoping to save the Overlord. Didn't want to spend Larva 100 minerals unnecessarily. Get supply blocked. Pretty good thinking. Pretty fast thinking to go for a double extractor trick to at least get more drones on the way. Trying to keep up in a very unfortunate scenario, because Maru presumably is macroing quite perfectly back at home. Just because it is a micro-intensive opener, but Maru is Maru, so we expect his macro to be good. As long as he's not the one being pressured, then there's a lot of forced errors in that regard, but he's not... I wouldn't count these 2 Lings almost killing supply depot being pressured. So he should be macroing quite well. And it seems to be the case. Command center on location might seem a little bit risky to a lot of people, but with the barracks floating into scouts, and then generally pros not really going for the counter, I would say. In my opinion anyways, I feel like I see pros a lot more, well, they either die straight up to the 2 racks, which best build on the market, right? Or Maru also got supply blocked, actually. So much for perfect macro. Or they go, oh shit, like I didn't handle that too well, let's try and macro really hard. It's been a while since I've seen a pro go for a counter Ling Bane attack or Roach Ravager response anyways, once they've dealt with the 2 racks. Roach Ravager response to the 2 rack itself, okay, we do still see that sometimes. And that would lead to a bit of a counter. Moving on from the 2 racks portion, however, we do have a very anticipated follow-up. A Hellion drop, probably one of the most popular follow-ups to a 2 racks, especially for Korean Terrans. But this is a twist. Comes with Marines, so gets an Overlord. That really is bothersome for Serral. Not in the aspect of him being supply blocked, because he's good on that front, just because of a little lost information and a little bit of a mess-up, potentially. Spore Crawler placement, that was pretty cool. And 5 drones do go down. I don't know exactly how a Zerg player is supposed to stop that from happening, really. Though the Spore was cool. That was just something that Maru was almost guaranteed to get. It was a couple more drones, maybe not up to 6, actually. Maybe more like 3 again. 3 versus 6, but it is what it is. So Serral, he got a Roach Horn. He's not just going into Roaches for protection for a macro game. He is actually going into Roaches for a attack. Now this I still wouldn't say is a direct, like... When I talk about a counterattack after a 2 rack, I'm thinking like a Ling Baneling bust right after, right? Something you might experience on ladder. This is still pretty early on. More of a mid-game. It's got Ling speed and Roach Ravager with it. Maru is able to scout it way ahead this time around and has the bunkers for defense. Also is getting a tank and a Banshee. One bunker does fall immediately, which makes this a little bit sketch, but the other bunker is already prepared to be fully surrounded. Banshee's going to start working on these Ravagers. Bunker is going to live by the looks of things. The Lings decided to go for something a little bit nicer, maybe trying to go into the main base. Going to full surround on the Hellions as well as the tank, which also is on top of those supply depots. The Lings are allowed into the main base, but the Ravagers are being choked up in the natural, not able to kill that bunker. And the Lings in the main, not actually going to do as much damage as you might think, means that Maru has successfully held. Did he play a little bit risky? Yes, I'd argue so. That could have gone much worse. If the second bunker doesn't hold, then all the units inside are forfeit. Pretty right, that's 100% they're forfeit. Not that 4 Marines would have added much, but as far as a bunker goes, as far as the bunker holding that threat, holding that damage, keeping the Roach Ravager from continuing forward with the Lings, that is absolutely huge. So a different world, Maru is like really overconfident, doesn't mass repair the bunker, lets that die as well, thinking, well, I got more units on the way. His mistake, because I really can't see any other reason to have a tank on the supply depots, his mistake of having the tank block his lift could have killed him. So again, this scenario, imagine instead of this living, it actually does go down, which the Lings also could have tried to opt for killing the SCVs instead of going around and just going after the army. But we can see that also would have been a problem as, 1, the AI kind of gets messed up, so maybe they don't actually attack what you want. And then 2, the Hellions wouldn't have been fully surrounded. They would have gotten a couple of good shots off on the Lings. So that would have maybe killed the bunker, but then there are other issues with that response. So instead, tries to go right for the main, maybe even hoping the SCVs stop mining, or repairing, rather. Usually, pros don't have them on auto-repair, because then they start repairing other things. But he might have here. They're not repairing the medevac, though, so maybe not. So he's just like constantly looking back to repair that bunker. So it's holding up the Roach Ravager, which is also getting bombarded by the Banshee. If the bunker fell immediately, then you're talking about still having 3 Ravagers and a handful of Roaches alongside all these Lings trying to enter into the main base. So with the tank blocking out the wall, as well as just straight up dying about as easy as possible. 0 out of 10 tank, thank you. Plus the Roach Ravager, that might have done enough damage to actually have Serral live in this game. I still don't think it would have actually ended the game. And I don't think there is a way with the setup that Maru had gotten that Serral would have won right here, looking at it. But these Lings are helped by Roaches. Maybe these Hellions don't get a couple of those last shots. Maybe some Roach Ravager kills a couple of, 6 extra SCVs, because that's the magic number right now in the natural. So it's a total of 19 versus 13 SCVs killed. I mean, we're still not talking about a 1 game for Serral at all, but it would have maybe looked a little bit better. So Serral does start macroing afterwards, realizing that the time is up pretty quickly, honestly, so went back into droning. Maru has to be scared of a potential follow-up, because he is blind right now, but it's, I would say, if you're going to gamble, especially up against Serral on the largest map in the map pool after the attack was unsuccessful, basically, I feel like the gamble would be, okay, they're not going to do a follow-up attack. They're going to be spamming that drone button, trying to recover. So Maru is maybe thinking that. Salvages the bunker at the very least, so probably thinking that. I mean, if this was a secondary all-in, the tank would have helped, but the wall would have been busted. It would have still been a bit sketch, but it's not, is it? And the secondary all-in would have taken a very long time to accumulate. So it is macro, macro, macro. Medevac's going to come across and try and do a little bit of damage. Serral's trying to perfect the follow-up as much as possible. Getting to a 4th base, having his creep spread, starting to move again. Really limited amount of creep tumors, so it's not like it's going to be super amazing, but it also hasn't been harassed in a while, so it's okay. And then actually trying to get into his upgrades. You can only forgo those so much, I think, in this matchup, even in desperate times, desperate measures kind of situation. I mean, Zerg can't really easily go into what would maybe be like a comeback unit like the Lurker, right? So really, in this situation, the comeback game is getting to just right drone amounts, whatever that might be in the situation, and then getting good Ling-Baneling engagements, so surrounds or connections or what have you. There's not really a key comeback unit like maybe Surprise DTs. We'd say that for Protoss, for Terran. Probably talk more about like going Super Saiyan on drops. And I guess for the Zerg, there also is the power of the run-by. So that should be accounted for by Maru. Because all it takes is one good run-by to kill 10 SCVs, plus interrupt a push by 20 seconds, and then suddenly Serral has enough Banelings that the push is further stalled out. And the more that's stalled out, the more chances that the Zerg player has to recover. Raven harassment's been annoying, but I think ultimately not too bad. Seems to be cleaned up pretty quickly. And we have Maru adding a third CC, now saturated. He did go for double upgrades, just one engineer base on the front lines, and does go up to a total of 7 barracks, not 8, so not an 8 racks all in, but 7 barracks nonetheless. No second factory. It's going to be very heavy on the bio, and a little bit more committed. So if this doesn't work, Serral might be able to make the comeback happen from that point. As it is right now, Serral has reached 65 drones, 67 drones, my bad, which seems like that is the point where he's saying, I can now build the army. Because from the Zerg's perspective, of course, it's difficult. You need a lot of economy to further play out a StarCraft 2 game, but they can't get too much economy that they die to a push, right? Conundrums. So Serral decides that this is the amount that is okay. Starts up 2-2 right now, actually, and might regret that. We do have one of those pesky Ling, even Baneling run-bys as well. Supply Depot was not lowered. Well, it was lowered, but it was where the Marines are being rallied to, and the Marines had only just started to be rallied to that, so there weren't enough of them to stop this. So this is a good run-by. It's going to do some damage by looks of things. How much does it slow down the push, however? Because that is far more critical. The tank's plentiful number is going to abuse some of these spots, use the choke. I mean, Maru is right now going a little bit deep onto creep, but the Baneling numbers aren't high enough to truly be threatening. In fact, jumping on some of the building ones as well. Serral's problem is not necessarily even the bank right now, so 2-2 probably would not have changed the circumstances. It really is larva and having enough Banelings already formed. So if he did have 10 more Banelings actually done, then this could have been an opportunity to swamp. I mean, when the Terran player feels like they have to gun it or they can gun it, like either one, that does open up, I think, an opportunity for the Zerg player to pounce, and depending on how well they've played the game, how much stuff they actually have, that pounce can be devastating to the Terran's momentum, or it can look stupid. They're just like, well, clearly that wasn't going to work. But in this case, I think Serral realized if he did try to pounce, it wouldn't really work out. He needs more units, so he's trying to buy as much time as possible, but cannot lose the space. So eventually he's going to have to try and break out. And Maru really has given Serral one of the better opportunities to try and take an engagement so deep on a creep. Even the tanks are on creep. You know, that are quite abusing the situation, the walls like I was expecting, although 2 of them are. Another 2 aren't as much, but just the amount of stuff is not high enough. Queens were also pulled probably pretty late. I say that this is like super, super, super high-level critical stuff right now. Stuff that, yeah, I'm not blaming Serral for not doing at all. But I think if he were to look at this as well, having all of his queens on the front line with this engagement can sometimes really, really help. Not they're going to be transfusing Lings and Banelings, of course, but they might tank a lot of shots if the Terran player isn't on the ball about focus firing with the tanks. And that's actually probably the best that they can do, honestly. A little bit of extra DPS as well. Never hurts, and it's better than having nothing else. I mean, you might as well use what you got. In this case, it's queens, but they're pulled pretty late. Serral tries to go for the best around possible. In this case, this one tank actually does provide even more of a choke, so that kind of is useful. This one's just kind of, you know, you might die, but you'll die for me, thank you. So this round couldn't really happen. The Baneling numbers have disappeared. The tanks are still alive even. I guess this is also where queens can be surprisingly helpful, although they take years to kill a tank. I mean, they're not being bothered right now, so maybe they will, right? It's just that Serral did not have quite enough. The run-by was really good. 28 SCVs were killed, but it didn't buy any time, and then obviously it was Lings and Banelings that weren't back at home defending. If he had what he sent across the map, it was like 20 Lings and 6 Banelings back at home, he might have been able to hold, especially if they got a surround. But really, he could have done the run-by and maybe held at home if he was able to use all of his resources immediately. And on top of that, if he had more larva, like a lot of larva, then maybe he also shouldn't have gotten 2-2 and then spent all of that money as well. But very, very, very difficult decisions to make. And now Maru gets to play around with 2 tanks sieged up, more reinforcements coming through. Marines now off of creep, having a much easier job, not getting hit by banelings. And that is going to be it. Maru strikes back to take game number 2. And now let us move on to the next one. Game number 3 is going to be on Waterfall. In the bottom left, Serral. Top right, Maru. This was a best of 7, but with a map advantage to Serral, also veto to Serral. I don't actually remember what he chose as the veto. So he didn't veto either one of these small maps, right? Moondance and Waterfall. And just totally out of my brain right now what he actually did veto. Anyways, this map, Waterfall. Kind of small. Kind of small. One of the smallest we've ever had. In regards to this matchup, it's not so much some of the earlier pushes that the Hellions get over faster to you or Banshees get over faster. It is a lot more about the mid-game pushes getting over faster. The way that the map gets condensed, the more that you expand. So before you know it, the Zerg player is not just 32 seconds away from their opponent, or whatever the rush distance is, but you have a situation where Maru's here and Serral's there, and that's like a 10-second walk. So it gets kind of scary. Because we also do assume that Terran player is the one that's going to take advantage of those types of situations a little bit more. Either the Terran player is hitting at a time that is uncomfortable for a Zerg player who's trying to drone, so more so on like a 2-to-3 base situation, or they are late game and are moving siege units. So they're actually just sieging up closer and closer, and it's like the serial killer that's coming after you, right? Usually that's more intimidating for a Zerg player. But it really depends on how the game goes, really. I mean, as much as a small map can kind of default to thinking a Terran to be good against Zerg, and all the rally pushes that also happen faster, and the ability to plant a planetary close to your opponent to help defend, so on and so forth, it also means that just generally momentum is really harsh. So if you have the momentum, it feels like it snowballs a little bit more on a small map. There's less chance for you to take some extreme risks, like extreme economy. A hidden base obviously is very unlikely, and less room for your opponent to just kind of be dawdling in the middle of the map, not doing anything. Like Cosmic Sapphire is a chance Maru is just taking a long way around to get somewhere, and you pass by him and, well, get a run by, right? That's kind of what happened. A little less so on a very small map, especially once sensor towers come into play. So theoretically, it's supposed to be a good situation for Maru to tie up the series, but it really does depend on how the game actually goes, right? So some of the things could throw a wrench in this plan. Is anything that Maru does in the early game goes wrong, or anything that Serral does in the early to mid game goes right. So any type of roach push, or run by, or what have you. Fast meat is probably not likely, but just anything like that, right? And then say none of that happens, and we do get to a really late game, then again, who has momentum? Who's already in the better position? Who has taken control over the map? Either person can be very, very scary then. So 3 base coming up in now, and Maru's going for a double gas opener. Once again going to that medevac opener, which this time around Serral does not actually send a Ling in. Almost spoke too soon. Yeah, the Ling's just chilling. Doesn't see the Ling, doesn't get the Ling into the main to see that it is going to be a Marine opener once again, which so often comes with a medevac, which was going to be weak against roaches. If Serral had, could he have done the roach rush? Yes, I do believe so. Another short map to do one on as well. The problem then would be almost like being afraid that you'd be baited. So if the Ling saw this, and Maru saw the Ling saw this, right? And it was like, oh, okay, you might try and cheese me again. He might just go into a tank, as I was saying in the first game. That is an option to provide more safety against the early shenanigans. But for him, of course, if he were to think that, go for a tank, and then it wasn't an all-in from Serral, then it might just be a kind of a weird build from then on. So it still relies a lot on this medevac eventually getting scouting and, good scouting, which it missed out on in that first game. Medevac and Hellions alike, actually, both trying to get some scouting done. Woodamind's going to burrow. A bit of a late pull on the drones, but good micro there. So only loses 1. Maru picks everything up, though, so that's also pretty good for him. And Queens are pushing back those Hellions, of which there's only 3. I mean, good enough to barbecue a drone line if they're totally unbothered, but unlikely to actually get that far. Looks like a Marine's chasing down an Overlord to the very back right. think there's a safe spot back there. Yeah, for sure, for sure. And the Overlord, what did it actually dip in to see? I guess the Tech Lab and the Raven, yeah. Which, since the build has already been shown in one game, it is a pretty typical way to play. Probably knew that was going to be a Raven from the Tech Lab. Not some random Battlecruiser, and not some Banshees. This time around, not going to go directly into a 2-base follow-up, which was the plan on Moondance. It just didn't get to go and actually be done because he died before then. This actually came down to the 3rd CC, then an extra 2 barracks. So not going to do any super aggressive 2-base push. Perhaps a little on the nose for a short map like this. This is a kind of frustrating push for Serral. I mean, it's a bit ragtag. Oh, the Widow Mine. That was a pretty nice shot. Decent enough, but also injured a lot of Terran units, so the medevac does get destroyed. But the ragtag group, just having just that barely enough firepower sometimes to throw the Zerg player a little off. They didn't want to bring all the queens forward. They didn't want to use their lings to help out, and suddenly it goes way worse. In this case, this hit squad is going to get a cancel and a second cancel on the 4th hatchery. So that is 150 minerals that was lost right there. And Serral was certainly prioritizing just getting that down as fast as possible. And Maru's, I think, he'll be pretty happy with that. It sucks the medevac died. I could still be flying around, clearing up more creep tumors, bothering him, so the Hellions can clear up more creep tumors, whatever. But it is what it is. Still getting the double cancel is pretty nice. And that is so far really the only thing that has happened. Otherwise, Serral has gone up to, well, it looks like 4 gases, not taking him the natural. Already up to 71 drones as well. And this is all off of kind of limited scouting. Apparently a Ling did get in there and saw the 3rd CC was building, so he knew it wasn't going to be a 2-base push, which I guess is why I felt so comfortable doing that. If it was a little more ambiguous, we might have seen him stall out more earlier on the drone count. But seems like that information was good enough. And now that he is at 71 drones, I mean, he could either try and push it even further to 80 drones, which would be maybe possible in a game like this. Maru is not doing any push, right? Or he could just build a lot of army anticipating it. So it looks like army's going to come out first, maybe then 10 additional drones. He's probably apprehensive even, kind of like waiting, like, okay, what's the plan here? What's the plan here? But Maru still has to wait for medevacs to pop out. The starport production on medevacs was actually quite delayed. I'm going to assume because it was used to hot swap a bunch of reactors, but I'm not 100% sure about that. This is it's still 7.5 minutes, so maybe it's not delayed. It just feels like it is because Serral has already gotten the 75 drones. So 75 drones and an army is what is really throwing me off here. So an army with 1-1 too. Basically what I'm saying is Maru is doing this push because it is usually a good one, and it is actually getting into position by the looks of things. But Serral was quite prepared for this one. Maru is also being run by. Nice tank positioning, so lost 7 SCVs. Is on top of the hatchery. Like I said, Serral was actually ready to go for this. +1 carapace finishes just as the engagement happens. Hot diggity damn. And this was a complete bop, really. Maru only able to escape with 2 medevacs full of units. Not even really that. 1 Hellbat taking up more space than it really should. You don't deserve it, my dude. And then now we have a weird scenario, which especially on Waterfall is going to happen, where the Zerg's going to immediately counterattack. Of course they are. So the medevacs have to unload into Ling Baneling. That's not ideal. It looks like the reinforcements will be enough to hold. And I think there is something interesting that even happened there. I remember pointing out in the cast. We'll look at it. So a tank sieges up. Oh, it got a really good shot. That's what happened. Yeah, that tank just meant that it was, instead of, what, was it 9 Banelings? It turned into 3, which had less chance to connect with the Marines. Yeah, that was an excellent focus fire there from Maru. Because otherwise, you know, 4 or 5 extra Banelings might have actually hit this pocket of Marines. Still probably doesn't snowball to Serral's victory by the looks of things, but would have made it more concerning, at the very least. But Maru will hold, repair up that tank, and then go back on the map, clear up some of this creep spread, which is has been stalled out just with everything that's happened, but it's through the middle of the map. Want to take care of that. 2-2's on the way for both parties. Serral is now up to 81 drones and 5 bases, actually, whereas Maru is only just now starting his 4th base. So the supply doesn't look that bad, with Serral being in the lead supply-wise, having 5 bases, 80 drones, basically being set, and getting to technology. His hive is on the way. It just doesn't, actually, it's a bad pace for Maru. if you could flip the scenario and have him finishing his 4th CC while Serral finishes the 5th hatch, I guess would be kind of the equivalent, then you'd be saying, oh, Maru's really got a good pace going. But you know, the attack on that 4th base was really not very good. It was not even effective. It wasn't effective. Well, I mean, maybe it did force Serral to consider building an army first rather than getting 80 drones immediately. That's true. But then it was so ineffective at actually like trading and causing a lot of chaos, causing a lot of time to be taken to take care of it. It was immediate. Serral just cleaned it up immediately. Now tracking the drops as Maru goes into kind of late game mode, which is getting his bases up and secure back at home while just doing drops on the other side. This is pretty much something that Terrans can abuse all over the world since mutas aren't very popular and corruptors wouldn't be made just for this. Hydras would have trouble also reaching this far into the mountains. You couldn't blame them for it. But with a hive on the way, we do have a 3rd option to take care of medevac drops, and that is Abducts, which, you know, if the medevacs are flying around like this one, unlikely to be caught by a Viper. But if they're just going to stay stationary here, that's going to be a bit more questionable. Sunstar sees a lot of Ling Baneling, and I don't think Maru's too worried. Actually, Serral maybe just hoping that... Okay, a little surprised Serral decided to pull the trigger on that one. I was maybe hoping that Maru wasn't paying attention, but that's something that you probably shouldn't be hoping when it comes to facing Maru. So it was just maybe hoping the tank line was not as deep as it was, but there's actually quite a few tanks. So, whatever. He's going to move on. Juno Glance on the way. Hydra's Vipers actually already made, and the Hydra upgrades are on the way too. Knows about the drops with an Overlord. Technically, Maru could escape through the north side. I remember pointing this out. Might even be able to, if Serral doesn't focus fire anyways, might even be able to save all 3 medevacs, but is choosing to stay put while, again, getting the 4 base set up back at home. There's the Abducts I was alluding to, which, I mean, really just a huge loss of life for nothing in return. We're not going to count energy because, especially because there's something else happening where that energy would otherwise be necessary. Because if something else is happening and the Vipers are dealing with this, then maybe we could consider it a problem, but absolutely not. It's just a few more drops on the right side being covered by Ling Baneling. I did read a, let's say, interesting perspective on the triple drop, that it actually did what it was supposed to, as far as keeping Serral back at home. And I can kind of see, that, right? I do think that's generally what the drops are for, but I don't think you can really say that trading out 3 medevacs for literally nothing is actually that good, because Serral wasn't going to plan on doing anything else anyways, is really my problem with that take on it. Yes, Maru wanted to buy time, have Serral be at home, have him worry about a big old doom drop into the main or 3rd or 4th or whatever it is. Okay, sure. But there wasn't much else that Serral needed to do at that time. It's not like he lost out on aggression or momentum by dealing with that. And he took care of it. Lickety split, now going to go for the counterattack also pretty quickly. A couple blinding clouds go down before the EMPs take them out. Banelings rolling into the SCV line are going to connect with SCVs, Marines, maybe a couple of Ghosts, and of course the Planetary itself also goes down. Quick replacements, as Maru had a 5th already done, and his 6th actually was not canceled, so that's some good news. But that was a quick pop-off on a Planetary. Looks like this base was canceled or killed by a drop, so Maru's got something kind of going alongside the loss of Planetary, but this is still a dangerous game for Maru. Now, it's a game that Maru's very comfortable with, considering his past, playing into the late game, eventually taking very cost-efficient trades, and making Turtle, Terran, and Ghost, I guess specifically, look very overpowered. That's something that Maru likes to do, right? But having a 4 base set up just barely against a Zerg player who has taken so far very good trades, so we're not talking about a weird, we're not talking about super late game map situations yet, right? Where the Zerg has spent too much cash taking what is usually inefficient trades and starting to run literally out of minerals. Now, we're not there yet. In fact, let's check the resources lost. All things considered, not that many resources lost, I would say. There's not been a lot of scuffles. And then only a 4,000 difference between the two. So that just means that Serral has a lot of room to play, right? So that might have been a very dangerous thing for Serral to do if he didn't have as much of a bank, if he didn't have as much of the map, if he didn't have as many bases, and it's such a great setup to begin with. That could have been dangerous. You put that many resources into killing the Planetary that's immediately replaced, some people would even say that's a bit foolish. But I think in this particular case, Serral is the one that has a lot of freedom. So could even make 1 or 2 bad decisions and still probably be okay. Looks like a parasitic bomb went down on the medevac that was trying to do a drop. Maru is getting all of the upgrades, everything, and the kitchen sink. So we got Hellbats on the way, which by now is not too uncommon for Maru to do, right? I'm still really on the fence on whether I find them effective or not. I understand their position. I don't know if it's going to, you know, I guess, how to say, I don't know if it's going to change the late game, actually. But that is nonetheless what Maru has been doing, experimenting with. I 100% am on board with them if we're talking about a Broodlord position, actually. I love the addition of Hellbats in that situation. But if we're talking about any other position, so Massling, Baneling, Hydra, Viper, or, you know, Ultras, or Lurkers, yeah. I don't know. They're nice to have for dealing with the Ling Baneling swamps when the tanks can't seem to deal with them themselves, but in this engagement, it really is more about the tanks. There is a depth of them that is undeniably good. Ling Baneling continuing to roll forward, though, taking many of the tanks down, but also getting blasted, especially going over this bridge. Did not have a good time there, and Serral is forced to retreat, at least temporarily. But while that was a retreat and a loss of a hatchery, Serral has gotten other bases up and might even start to take down Maru's space. This is really supposed to be his. Maru puts an orbital on location, which means it's a little less defensive. Not a planetary to fall back to, but obviously the economy is good, and arguably because he's going to be here anyways, it's fine. But having a planetary no doubt adds some defensive structure to you. But orbitals can live, so that's also a good thing, I guess. So that might live, but the rest of the army might not. So much of Maru's army is actually really far behind these engagements, which is kind of a tricky situation for Terrans a lot of the time. Supplies at one second ago were okay, and then 156 Lings were rebuilt. Holy shit. But anyways, the tricky situation for a Terran player is that the depth of tanks is usually a good thing. So when a Zerg player says, oh, there's not that many tanks, they run forward, and then suddenly there's 5 other tanks blasting away, they didn't quite realize, well, that's usually very good for the Terran, right? But like all races and all scenarios in StarCraft, what you don't want to have happen is a weird like 20%, 20%, 20%, 20% army engagement, which I think kind of happens here. And it's one of the reasons that Maru, even though he's maxed out on good upgrades and a good composition, is struggling to defeat Serral's composition effectively. I think it has to do with having his army too disjointed, too much of a tank depth, and not enough of actual like tank firing. So with that, look at this engagement once again. Army supply in favor of Maru. He's obviously paying attention to the fight. He's trying to micro the fight. But already a lot of the frontline units get destroyed. Still looks okay, though, right? The supply is even favoring him right now. And then you have the Marines getting taken down, tanks getting taken down. Some beautiful tank shots, no doubt about it. But then these units all over here were not part of the engagement. Some of them were reinforcing, so that's just going to happen. That's like, you can't blame Maru for that one, right? But point is that a lot of the engagement was a little bit of like, well, this, and then this, and then this, and then all of this. And you get to all of this, that's pretty scary, plus the planetary. But even then, Blinding Cloud, Lings on top of it. Ghosts managed to survive. But not too much else, actually. And I think that just has to do with maybe the lack of buffer units. So the tanks, with their range, with their focus fire, really, really great at taking down Baneling clumps and Ling clumps, right? But Ling clumps are still a little bit weirder because all you really need is like 6 Lings to kind of survive and get on top of a tank to then take it down because they're also cracklings right now. So tanks kind of still need to be protected. They're being protected, and they're protecting the units that are protecting them. That's synergy. That's beautiful. And that's where Hellbats can really help, for sure. But that doesn't happen here. So many of those tanks were dead towards the end of the fights, as there wasn't a line of Marines or a lot of Hellbats or even the Ghosts there to stop them. Because Ghosts are also pretty good at killing Lings. It's just the Ghosts were reinforcing / kind of behind the army. So I think that's what is getting to Maru. That's in Serral, of course, being able to instantly remax at any given point is also bad. Now I'm going to set the planetary down on the base location. Otherwise, it's going to swap these ones. Either way, it works out. But the planetary is not yet done. Maru is going to choose to go ahead and pull the SCVs, although not entirely. I don't know if that was on purpose or not. And this time, I think we have a lot of tanks firing altogether, but only 4 tanks, I guess, which maybe isn't as impressive as it once was. This army has to run away, so it's not actually engaging. It's not doing damage. It's not in this nice little concave off of creep with the tanks behind it. So Serral can continue just rolling forward, and then the spell casting also happens. I think we also have some tanks elsewhere, so supplies haven't really been, like, fully correct, I guess. And the Banelings could go after the SCVs at this point, which is exactly what they do. Still plenty of Zerg on the left side as well, going after SCVs and the planetary. Some of those SCVs will live to tell the tale, as well as some of those ghosts, but the supply absolutely not looking so hot for Maru, who lost all control over the forward-placed base too, which means that he's still locked in on 4 bases, which is not going to work the longer this game goes. It's just not going to. He's going to have to get more resources. Maru has 1 more chance to remax, I would say, but does he actually get that chance, or does Serral just shut the book on him? Serral does eventually take that base, by the way. Because the thing is, I think if Maru did get a 5th base up and running and took more effective trades plus that means he gets the base up and running, I do think we gotta talk about the limited size of the map. We gotta talk about how Serral is going to reach a point where he just can't mine as much as he would like and does start to kind of peter out a little bit, right? But that the reverse happened, so Serral's totally fine. And the ghosts just don't look as good as they have in other games. Not just because Serral has been doing far more pure Ling Baneling Hydra attacks against late game Terran, because this is not the first time we've seen this from him. He's done it versus Maru in other games. He did it versus Gumiho in their series in TSL, but is seemingly working a lot more effectively than ever before. Because I think that was always a tricky part about playing Ghost in the late game, was making sure to balance out the Ghosts versus just the mass Zerg, right? Great against any single target units, Lurkers, Ultras, Broodlords, Ghosts are great against that. And they're still pretty damn good against everything else, don't get me wrong, but it was just always one of those balancing acts where you could be overwhelmed because you did put too many resources into Ghosts that did get surrounded, and then there you go. But Maru, for I feel a while there, was just making them look straight up overpowered. Like, oh, I've tried Mass Ling Baneling Hydra, and I've tried all, like, you know, Mass Lurker and shit like that, and I do nothing. It feels like Serral cracked the code a little bit. He certainly is looking to win this game. Does lose the base, and is starting to take some inefficient engagements up this ramp into the choke, into the tank fire. But as this base still going along, certainly doesn't need to worry about gas anytime soon. And actually, if it looks to be an unsuccessful defense, the Banelings rolling into the tank fire once again, Serral might just go ahead and lose this base. And we are talking about a limited income. Main base, natural, 3rd base, 4th base, all starting to lose out on minerals. Even the 5th down to just a few set of minerals. So we do have a situation starting to arise. Serral, if he had taken slightly worse engagements over the last 20 minutes, or one really bad engagement over the 20 minutes, he might just be too broke. We might be talking about a situation where it's 92 army supply or regular supply for Maru versus like 130 before Serral can continue building. And that's not impossible for the Terran, right? But Serral did get a little capped out at 130, then income came in, now going up to 160, whereas Maru is actually locked in under 100 supply. Now with mass mules coming down, I guess he'd be okay. But on an orbital, Lings come in, Infestors are sharking around as well, waiting for the fungal on top of the Ghosts. Maru was not in position to secure that base at all, was hoping to drag the army to the left side, but didn't really work out timing-wise, and is now just trying to engage, but there is a lot of Zerg left over. Goes for no price on a tank. It doesn't really matter what Serral did, as I think the supplies were just too favorable for him. Again, can be a bit nasty. 50 army supply to 80. There's a lot of things that Maru could have done, but 35 to 80, some of that in a bunch of medevacs, not necessarily helpful in these big battles. Well, these not big battles, these burst battles. There we go. Not necessarily helpful in burst battles, but they do help evacuate, so the Ghosts are going to live for now. But now Maru's down to 55 supply. And again, if there had been worse engagements, or if Serral had been slower to expanding or more overconfident, so he didn't bother expanding or something along those lines, then Maru could be accurately thinking, all right, I might be at a terrible supply, but maybe the Zerg guy's also not doing so hot. It's a small map, not a lot of resources to drain. But that's not the case. And there we had the Neuroparasite on the Ghosts. More style points than anything else there. So GG, Serral goes on to match points. 3-1, best of 7. Just looking quite damn dominant. I don't know. I gave my best shot at saying why Maru was losing some of those engagements, which I think I've got that pretty much correct. Like, I can see how Maru could improve. But as to why Serral is cracking Maru more than anyone else, aside from getting set up so well, I don't know if there's anything in particular with the way that he is engaging that is making it so good. But I guess that's where you compare and contrast to other replays, if you can. Which, actually, Maru did play Lambo in this tournament, so that would probably be the best person to compare it to. But yeah, Serral just looks super, super good. So let's move on to the next game. And we're into, what's game number 4? Yes. It's weird, the math, when there's a point already given to a player. In the top rights, up 3-1, he is Serral. In the bottom left of Data C, it is Maru. So if Serral wins this, he wins. Maru still trying to make the comeback happen. Hasn't really seemed... I mean, that last game, I feel like around Maru's third base, when that engagement happened, you did start to wonder, did Serral run out of steam? There is a little bit of wonder in there, but quickly you realize, no, he's actually not in any trouble. But he still was... That is one of those things that can happen, especially with Maru, is the Zerg player does seem to be in an almost dominating position, but then they just do take a bad fight, or they didn't take as many bases as they should have, or even transferred drones can be a problem. There's a severe oversaturation in 1 or even 2 bases that they only fix once they realize they can't remax. Like, that screwed people over before. So I feel like that, even though it didn't actually end up being anything big, it's still one of the ways that Maru could have won. So, but the reason I'm just kind of like, I don't know, is because I really don't know what Maru could be doing better in those mid to late game scenarios. As far as early game goes, well, there's a lot of different build orders that could be thrown out. So we do have a command center first going into 2 barracks, so a big change up for Maru. So there's a lot to be said there, and as far as, you know, can Serral perfectly defend against everything? The one game Serral has lost, it was certainly an imperfect defense of a 2 racks. So I'd say Serral's probably also very mentally on guard against the 2 racks. Hasn't done any pool first or anything like that, but probably mentally prepared for it. But Maru is not going to go for that maneuver. No, it's quite the opposite of the command center first. And it's really hard to punish this as a Zerg player. 16 pool won't do anything to it, really. Well, actually, if you made 6 lings against this, since there isn't a wall and there's a fresh reactor, you could cause a lot of chaos. That is true, but with a guy like Maru, even if he made 6 lings that got into the main, presumably his Marine Micro with an SEV pool would be too good anyways to really be called effective. So yeah, that usually doesn't cut it, and then you're not going to proxy hatch as Serral for many professional Zergs. And in general, that just would only be good against maybe a command center first. Everything else that a Terran can do, and, you know, obviously scouting that it would be a proxy hatch, would probably make the proxy hatch really bad. So just no Zerg's going to blind counter this, pretty much. A Ling gets in, though, and sees everything, which really, really sucks. I mean, a Ling could have seen that it was a command center first, and that's alright. But to get in and literally see everything, the fact that it is 2 barracks, that is just... there are so many more options, you know. The Ling only saw a Marine, and then it died. Could have been factory. Could have been Hellions, Armory. Could have been freaking double battle cruisers, man. Taking on Gumiho style. But nope, sees it's 2 barracks, so knows that at the very least a 2-1-1. But as to what exactly a 2-1-1 timing it is, that's also up in the air. So there's that. Specifically, a 3rd CC coming down for the third building, the factory. So if you were to do a very literally 2-base 2-1-1, then that would not happen, right? So this is going to kind of hit the middle of like a true 2-base 2-1-1 and a 3rd CC then 2-1-1, which I think is like literally in the middle. So 2-base would hit at 5 minutes, 3rd base would hit at 5:30. I think this actually hits at like 5:15. I think it really does cut it right through the middle. But we'll just pay attention for that. Also, size of the map can matter, so on and so forth. But Serral knows that roughly, like, what he has to be concerned about is about 5 minutes. So that up until that point, droning and building queens. And then when you start to get around 5 minutes, 4:45 or something, then you want to bust out maybe 20 lings. So that's kind of one of the downsides of doing a 2-1-1 is that it is not always just the normal thing. There are variations, including this 3rd CC variation, but I'm thinking also like Hellion variations. But otherwise, when a Terran's or a Zerg scouts this, if it is kind of the norm, it really is easier for the Zerg player to play almost perfectly. So you kind of really do have to do like a little bit of offsetting, doing a little bit different build, or doing a little bit of a different pattern of movement. So medevac into the main, medevac's not even here. This is hitting earlier because Maru goes without medevacs. Which, that's so many queens with chance seizes. But even though this could have been a gotcha move, since all the queens are together, I don't think it can be. If this was only 3 or 4 queens, that's easy snipe on those. Maybe you find the other 4 queens as well. That would have been sick. But all of them together have a lot of time buying, and the Lings are going to race over once they realize what's going on. So, yeah, hitting like 5:15, 5:20-ish, right? 3rd CC lands, scouted by Serral. So if there was some hesitation as far as to the in-between that was going on. Oh, we also got into the main again. Saw a tech lab on the factory. Okay, so yeah, there's really... I mean, Serral has had most information. He has lost track of the army a little bit. And also has chosen to add on a couple of banelings, which is really... It's going to sound really extreme, but it is kind of overly safe. The baneling nest isn't strictly necessary for the first drop. It really isn't, actually. Not even strictly necessary. It really isn't necessary for the first drop. But if you're concerned about being something a little bit weird, a little bit clever, maybe it actually was a 3 or 4 racks. Something like Cure was doing a while ago. Although not with this particular build order, but still, just kind of the general idea. Or if it was going to be like a Hellbat edition or something like that, then yeah, banelings would help. But if it really was going to be Humdrum, 16 Marines, 2 medevacs, Ling Queen can deal with it, then afterwards... might want to get banelings, but just a minor note, it does mean that Serral's invested a little bit more into the defense. Maru can kind of crack a smile at that one. Well, of course, he has his 3rd CC actually on location and mining. This is a very economic 2-1-1. So the supply of workers has really never been all that different. Even though Serral might have had an opportunity to get up to 80 drones, even right now. Could probably get up to 80 drones, but it's choosing not to. 1-1's also a bit more delayed. Really did prioritize, well, 4 bases and a baneling nest. Which does mean the baneling speed's going to be done. So I do think that's pretty important that the baneling speed was started kind of lickety-split. So this could have been a bit later on the bane speed. And Maru would have had more room to play with. The bane speed is going to finish. 1-1 is done for Maru's team. And tanks are positioned quite nicely. It's a very abusive spot. Serral's building up for a huge surround, letting those queens tank the damage while everything else gets set up. And now we have the attempted break happening right now. And here it comes on the backside for the most part. Queens dealing with the right side. Medevacs retreat back to those tanks. Not to pick them up, of course. They're siege. They're out of luck. But to pick up the majority of the Marines, leaving these guys to die. The queens did their job. The Ling Baneling had plenty of time to position. And Serral does hold. But again, not at 80 drones. Not at 80 plus. That was 70, with only 7 more just getting busted out right now. So really, as far as keeping the Zerg suppressed, I think this is doing a good job. Maru is really making Serral sweat having to... Okay, well, never mind. Yeah. I was going to say having to pick and choose rather than just being like, la 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 drones, la 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 versus army. No, well, I think Serral is no longer sweating. Baneling's actually getting connection with those Marines was pretty big, because that was a big drop. That was a big drop that could have hovered off of the creep and still been a threat to the Queens, to the Ling Baneling, and now cut down to just 6 Marines instead of whatever 14, 16 it was. Yeah, not as scary. Not as scary. 4th TC is done and moving over from Maru. And I feel like pacing-wise, we're talking about a much better game for the Terran player compared to last. Looks like upgrades have even up a little bit. Maru's now getting up to 3 additional barracks. I do believe he has 2 factories. Yep, so we're not going to go full on bio style. We're going to get ourselves another late game TvZ. One where Serral did not just get set up almost immediately. So this should be a little more contentious. Should be a little more back and forth. Although, well, back and forth is kind of hard to say. When the Terran wants to dig in their heels and just basically turtle, it's not so much back and forth as it is you move to me, and I stay here. But it should be a little bit more difficult for Serral to actually kill Maru. Now, that said, the map is now very different as we watch a drop get cleaned up again. The map is very different. So, well, Serral doesn't have the much faster 5th compared to Maru's 4th. Doesn't have, just pacing-wise, really nice time hive and a lot of control over the map. What he does have is a lot more kind of space to play around with, which means that he also has more space to get dropped, right? But it means that there's more bases to take that might not even be totally necessary. Where on Waterfall, it would quickly feel like, oh, I lost 1 base. I really needed that one because there's no other place to get a base. TvZ is a lot of options. I got a Wouldn't Mind drop killing 12 drones, which is pretty damn nice. And an attempted attack up to the north as well. That one was less successful. And Serral quickly rebuilds. But yeah, it looks like Serral even just goes ahead and cancels the top left. But the point is, like, a pretty good example. Top left could be taken, bottom right could be taken. They are so far apart from each other that it is only possible to lose both if it was a really well-timed double drop by Maru, as he is not pushing. Which is, I think, unlikely to get both. Whereas on Waterfall, I mean, he did get both 5th and 6th up. Or was it 4th and 5th? 4th and 5th up. He just is so much more constrained. Feels like one thing could lead to another. Big map like this, maybe not as much. Lurker Den being set up, now moving on to missile upgrades. We got plenty of extra command centers coming down from Maru. Ghosts, even getting rather slow here. And has +3 attack on the way. No armor quite yet, though. But super, super, super late game. Serral did stall out a couple of times on the economy. But now seems with the double expand going to be pretty comfortable. We do have kind of a little push. I'm actually a little surprised that Maru was doing this. He also may be a little surprised at it. He's going to pull back. It's not like it was super committed. Not all the tanks coming. And this is before he's even maxed out. He's filling his rest of his supply with ghosts. So I would have been very surprised if he had actually committed. But I guess trying to find some space over here maybe? And then Serral comes into the south side, which Maru might not have been expecting, but nonetheless has plenty of defenses. So the army itself may have been a little surprised, but chokes, SimCity, tanks sieged up. Serral is not going to easily find an opening. No, sir. And this is maybe a good example of how reaching towards a 5th screwed Maru over a little bit last game. How it could screw him over here, but maybe less so on a map like this. You can see that when it's all tucked in with SimCity and Tank Siege, it really is a red light. Like, Zerg really should not go for it unless they really know they're going to win. But when there's a little less to be said about SimCities and chokes, when there's more of a direct line of attack, then you saw Serral push those Lings back into the back lines very effectively. So I think TvZ is working better for Maru in that regard, the way that the chokes protect the 5th. Not so much the 6th, though. If you reach it down here, well, it's still kind of weird. Yeah, compared to Waterfall, which is a small map, but also weirdly wide open. So Serral's going to have to try, I guess, niftier tricks. Nidus Swarm is coming down. Speaking of, also just a really good idea to have in general. If you're not going for a Nidus Swarm late game versus Terran, then you're playing arguably incorrectly. You should just go for it. Just do it. And Serral is continuing to expand as well, not 94 drones, so starting to build up quite a bank too. So Maru needs to be on the ball for sure, but I think he has more opportunities to be on the ball. We have him racing back once again. Maybe a little surprised that Serral was ready to dance right there. So pulled back into the tank line, and that was okay, but lost all the forward movements. Serral kind of slapped him back. 6 SCVs go down. Fillings that were taken off to the side, not too bad, however. And the game will continue on, but Maru really was probably hoping for a better engagement. The thing is that these past 2 engagements, they really haven't been when Maru was the best defensively set up. He's been reaching out a little bit, so there's been less good about the defense than Maru would probably hope for. So he is struggling to get maxed out. Serral, like I pointed out, is starting to bank even and also explore additional options. Some more upgrades, lurker upgrades, fester upgrades, more creep spread, more bases, transferring his drone to the forward base that would most likely be next on Maru's hit list to take down and then take his own base there. So he's probably just purposefully trying to take the minerals. Could be this one actually, but it's up to Maru, I guess, and how he wants to engage, how he wants to advance. Right now, it's all about the defense once again. Tanks aplenty should be able to help out. The Planetary also tanked a lot of those Banelings. But I think right there wasn't as much SimCity as one would hope for Maru. Looking at this engagement piece by piece. First of all, Maru is down overall 20-ish supply. Army supply down by 7, which doesn't sound too bad, but I mean, usually you would say that Terrans would be up in supply because they have less workers. So it's still not an ideal army situation. Then the other thing that's going on is, again, tanks being used defensively elsewhere. So that's 4 tanks out of the engagement equation, as well as sort of reinforcements. But like I said before, can't really blame someone for not having reinforcements popping out in the front lines. Unless they're Protoss, then you can blame them. Anywho, so this, what you're seeing is what you're getting, which maybe isn't as much as it should be. Planetary is trying to help out, and it still is a scary position to move into. Plenty of ghosts, tanks sieged up, but the army over here is missing, so it's, literal body blocking purposes is missing, and also the DPS it'll add in, missing. Then there's no further choke made, so the armies can come, well, the army can really freely come through here. Less so through this option. It will get tagged by the Planetary, right, and then go and pop that, but fortunately Banelings are very good at that, aren't they? Basically what I'm saying is that if this Planetary was over here, then I think it'd be a lot more troublesome for Serral to push in through here, and then he would try and push in through there, no doubts, but if Maru had just been able to build a command center over here, I think this would have gone a lot better. But the lack of that, plus the lack of units, and the tanks were appropriately protected from the blinding clouds. Good EMP. They still weren't really all that protected away from the links. In this case, actually, a lot of Banelings. And the ghosts even try their best, really. The best you can micro them. So they're pulled back to live, but then they do stand their ground to help attack, but even that's not enough. And the Planetary does help on the very tail end of the engagements, but after a lot of tanks have already died, a lot of the bios already died, and Serral is going to remax pretty quickly afterwards, still on 93 drones, opening up, as I said, opportunities for other types of compositions. No Parasites on the way too. And now this is an orbital to the 5th base, which might be okay if Maru can get maxed out again. If is good. You can see that he's moved a lot of those tanks over, especially the one on the high ground here I think was too defensive, but moving 3 out of 4 of those tanks to the front lines. Still has very good production. Gonna finish up that +3 attack upgrade as well, or defense upgrade, sorry. But still down about 20 army supply this time around. A couple of the tanks not sieged. Many of them still are, however. And again, good EMP by looks of things. Oh no, double abducts go in. So a lot of tanks destroyed in this engagement. Snipes will come down to revenge, take out some of those more expensive Hydras as they try to retreat. And again, this Planetary helps to hold. That was maybe one of the worst engagements? Not the worst, but definitely not as good as some of the previous ones for Serral. But Maru is struggling to replace units in general. He needs a space to just mine, not having to constantly lift, not being destroyed. He needs to actually mine. As his main and natural getting mined out. Third also starting to get mined out. And fourth, ditto. Actually, same situation as the third base. Nidus Worm for instant reinforcements. Very Brood War, very Brood War. And another attack being prepared by the looks of things. This time around, Lurkers are included. Viper abducts the Liberators out of the equation. One of the tanks, the only tank, goes down pretty quickly. Nope, another tank was near the Planetary, but that also goes down. But the Planetary once again helps to hold, and so much more of the bio lived through that engagement. So actually, engagement's getting slightly worse all the time for Serral. Who backs away, I think, much more eagerly than ever before, trying to save whatever he could. Nidus Worm being used for anything? Oh, okay. Lurkers just got in. So really, this is very Brood War. Lurkers got in to try and defend the base. Alright. Didn't actually work, but still. And Nidus Worm goes up the main base, which this could be devastating. As we all know, Nidus Worm's the main base. Pop out a bunch of Cracklings, pop out a bunch of Lurkers. It all can do a ton of damage. One could even say that maybe Cracklings would still be the best. Because Lurkers, I think Terrans have gotten pretty good at using their Liberators to go and deal with this, or even using a small section of Ghosts to go and deal with this, which actually do well against Lurkers who are just going to be locked in themselves. So this usually forces a retreat back into the Nidus Worm. But I think Maru just made the mistake of using all of his Ghosts to return home. Yep, all of his Ghosts return home just for 3 Lurkers, meaning they're not in the front lines, adding DPS, adding snipes, adding EMPs, and the rest of the army just got obliterated. Planetary finally falls after so many battles. Would-be Planetary on the front lines also gets destroyed, not canceled, and Serral stays just about maxed out with plenty of bank, while Maru dips below 130 supply. All those Ghosts going to the main base, expecting more to pop out there, which could have been the case if there were 10 Lurkers that popped out of that main, as well as 20, 30 Lings. Well, that's not only something that the Ghosts are going to deal with effectively, it's also a lot of supply that Serral doesn't have trying to run into this base, right? So maybe that would have been an okay split. But as it was, it really was only 3 Lurkers. That's not cause to bring all of your Ghosts back. And we can see that we just have a substantial lack of units. And maybe the Ghosts would not have made the defense possible, maybe. But no doubt having 15, 16 extra units, pretty damn good units too, right here would have been nicer. Because, yeah, the Lurkers really aren't even too big of a problem. They're being as annoying as possible, all split up like they are, but they're not going to overrun. So that was just a unfortunate kind of guess, really, I think, from Maru, that the Nidus Worm was the bigger threat. Actually, it was, what, a red herring? I don't know what we want to call it. It was opening up the attack on the right side, which rolls through basically with ease. The bio gets destroyed. The tanks remain uncovered. Lings jump on top of everything. And yeah, like I said, supplies look absolutely terrible. Remax of 100 Lings coming down for Serral. Maru able to afford 2 Hellbats, 2 tanks, and 2 Marauders. 2, 2, 2. Not quite gonna cut it. And we have a true Zerg swarm feeling coming into the mini-map. Lings just spilling forth from every single base. And Maru gonna try once again to hold, because there's no other option. There's no other base to take that he should have taken. This was really the most logical one, and it still did not work out, even as he tried his best to turtle. Once again, Nidus Worm going up to the main base, but you don't know what's going to pop out. 20 Lurkers, 2 Lurkers, 100 Lings, 4 Lings, like who the hell knows? In this case, it is nothing. It is completely empty. And 3 Marauders go deal with that, and that is probably a better split, but it still doesn't matter. Maru just does not have enough on the front lines. Banelings actually decide not to chase after those Ghosts, as there is an Overseer to help them. And instead take down the Lings, or the SCVs. Infestor does get taken down too. Maru's got some pretty good eyes. But what does it really mean? We are watching the end very soon. No Infestor, no Parasite needed as once again Maru scans his own army. Very aware of that possibility. Well, that's not the only thing that's scary. Ghost fall backs, do a little spready, and Serral has to respect that to a certain degree, but now almost doubling the supply of his opponent. Serral doesn't have too much more to worry about. Just got to wrap this series up in a nice little bow. And he's got TSL balloon trophy in his hands. Might just be it. Very few units left over from Maru. Planetary barely standing, and Serral will take the series 4-1, despite Maru's best efforts to turtle out this game. And the last one. Serral just kept throwing bodies at him, and Maru never quite had the perfect defensive setup. That's going to be that. There we go. So, yeah, from the Terran side of things, they can pinpoint what could have gone better. And there certainly were a couple of glaring mistakes. All in all, I would not say that these were both players at 100%. I think Serral was probably at 100% or as close as you realistically can be as a human being. But Maru, I would say that he probably entered more into a 60 to 70% range, honestly. Could very easily be called a Maru fangirl, which would be a good change of pace, and so many people accuse us of being Serral fangirls and fanboys. But I don't know if that's really the case. I do think that we've all been amazed by Maru on multiple occasions over many years at this point. There's a reason these both are in GOAT contention status. But this wasn't it, right? I don't think anyone really watched the entire series live or at replay, whatever, and thought, oh, well, this was the battle of two people at their peak, you know? Serral was certainly peaking more. It's just kind of, it's super unfortunate. Everyone wants the super epic back and forth offline, but so far, Serral Maru's best of 7 has been online with the King of Battles, which I do suggest you guys watch if you're looking for some real good TvZ action. This one was a little lacking. A couple of more build order wins or early game victories, shall we say, and then a couple of turtle games that never really seemed to be good for Maru. He never actually got to dig in his heels and really force Serral to figure out the puzzle box, right? Serral kind of had it already figured out and then just threw bodies at him. Is Zerg overpowered? Is Terran underpowered? I don't know. That's up for you guys to decide, but I just think that Maru wasn't playing his totally A game. The reasons for that's probably just being an imperfect human being. Shock. Oh, gasp. Because it certainly wasn't jet lag. I don't think it was the circumstances of the day where Maru was like just so much more tired. No, TSL accommodated the players very well and had a very gracious timetable. So it was just an off day for him. That's my opinion anyways, as well as Serral being, of course, very, very, very good. I think Serral has a better understanding of how to deal with this than some of the other Zergs. How exactly he does, I think you would be better off listening to, like, Lambo explain that one. But, yeah, that's going to cut it for my cast / relook, whatever, recap, whatever you want to call this, of the finals. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you later for more StarCraft 2 casts.